Do you know what a sleeper is? A sleeper, if you're not aware, is the idea that from the outside it looks normal, unremarkable, just kind of plain. But when you actually get it to open up, it's a performer, it's a monster, it's a beast. And the Philharmonic Audio Affordable Accuracy Plus speaker is a sleeper. If you're not familiar with Philharmonic Audio, you're not alone. They're not a huge operation, but one of the things that they're really well known for is a speaker called the BMR, which is a three-way bookshelf speaker that has been reviewed by Erin's Audio Corner, Audioholics, and just a fantastic speaker by all accounts. And I was actually really interested in reviewing it, so I actually reached out to Dennis Murphy over at Philharmonic Audio, and I was like, hey, can I review the BMR? And he said, unfortunately, I don't have a BMR to send you, but I do have this other speaker kit that's going to be coming out pretty soon. Would you be interested in reviewing that? And I said, absolutely. I would most definitely be interested in reviewing that. Okay, so just want to get some basic specs of the speaker out of the way. First of all, this is a kit. So we're going to go over the general dimensions. So it's about 9 inches wide, about 11 inches deep, and about 14 inches high. It weighs about 16 pounds. It's a two-way bookshelf speaker, so nothing outstanding about that. It is a 6.5-inch woofer with a 1-inch tweeter, and then binding posts and port is on the back. So this is actually a Parts Express box. You're getting a cabinet. You don't have to make a cabinet yourself. And it's a quick kit, so crossover is assembled. You're just, no soldering. All you're doing is connecting wire together. But this is actually a really expensive Morel tweeter, and I'll put the specs up on that, or just the model. And then this is a Dayton classic woofer here. And so this is the general size of the box. It is 83 dB efficient, so rather low efficiency, but honestly, I didn't notice a huge difference in volume between the ELAC Unifies and this. So yes, it does need more power, but not surprisingly so. When you consider that the Morel tweeter is about $80 each, so $160 a pair, and then $20 each for these woofers, plus about $80 for the pair of cabinets, plus you've got crossover, and this speaker is actually being sold for $350. That's a pretty good deal, even just on paper. So I use these speakers once again in a few different rooms just to kind of test them out. I had them in a small office, I had them in a larger room, and then I use them down here in this kind of open area. And honestly, where they played the best is where they had the most room. So in the larger room, they did great. And then I felt like they even did a little bit better down here in this kind of open concept living room. They're rear ported, so giving them plenty of room is going to be an important part of getting them set up correctly. I did use toe-in to get imaging to really focus into place, and I think your average triangle that you're trying to achieve with you in the middle is a pretty good path for these speakers. Okay, so how do they sound? So one of the big things that really got me is I just started listening to a lot of different tracks. I didn't just stick to my test tracks. I started listening to everything. It just was a lot of fun. So overall, as a sound, very detailed and lots of cues, lots of clarity with the speaker. In fact, one of the things that really got me was I had actually planned to do a whole separate chapter in this review dedicated to a specific album, because when I was listening to it, it was blowing my mind, and I got so excited about it that I was going to do this whole thing on Glenn Gould's Goldberg variations, and I realized later on, no, maybe that's not such a great idea. But there's a lot of really cool things that it's doing. Okay, let's talk about the highs. So this Morel tweeter does some pretty cool stuff. So generally speaking, what I've found is that the highs are extended and airy. You get a lot of detail. You might think of this speaker as a little on the more forward side because of all of the clarity that you're getting. And one of the things that we found is that, so my wife and I were sitting down and listening to a recording. It was a piano piece by Clifford Curzon, Mozart, Piano Concerto number 23. Anyways, the recording was amazing, but it's an old recording. And before, I've just kind of heard it as just kind of being distant. But when we were listening to it, it had this sort of analog quality, which was just amazing. It just seemed like an old recording, not distortion, not weird stuff. It kind of almost had this like vinyl-like feel. And we were listening through, streaming files from my local server. And yeah, it sounded amazing. It sounded great. It had all these like cues that made you hear the difference between what would be kind of distant and fuzzy to being like this sort of, you could place exactly what it was, what that sound was, what the distortion was, and it was clear that it wasn't just an issue with, all of the equipment, it was the recording and the way it sounded. And it was really cool to hear. There were really cool moments where the imaging was so tight that you could place the piano behind the equipment rack on the other side of the wall behind it. And then, you were hearing like cough or whatever in the crowd, people adjusting in their seat. Everything sounded like you were there in the audience. It went from just being a cold recording to this sort of live event. It had this sort of presence to it, which was really cool. The mid-range on this speaker is good. And what I found is that the vocal clarity is good, detail is all there. It's not as pronounced as the ELACs were. So where I would rate it is kind of somewhere between the GR Research and the ELACs, just somewhere sitting in the middle. So good clarity, good tone. I don't feel like I'm missing anything, but it's not more forward in the recording. So it seems pretty linear with the rest of the speaker. Now, talking about bass, I was really surprised with how deep these went. So Dennis, he said, oh, hey, by the way, these things will go down to about 37 hertz. And I was like, wow, that is very low. Let's test that out. So we did do some frequency tests and listen to it. And we actually, in the mid-size room, we heard down to about 30 hertz. But, you don't listen to test tones. So what's it really like? And we found that there was bass, there was authority, there was clarity in the bass. You would hear things and it seemed weighted right. What I found is about the speaker is that across the board, the speaker seemed fairly linear with the way it was sounding. It had a little bit more tipped up in the highs, but bass sounded great. It went low, it was clear, and it was enjoyable. It definitely brought that bass when you wanted it. So I have notes writing down like all the different pieces of music that I listened to, and obviously I stopped writing things down after a while, but just it seemed like I was playing roulette with what new thing am I going to hear in this music that I've heard a million times? What new thing am I going to hear in the music? I kept hearing new things every time I played a song. Now, No speaker is perfect, and each speaker has its positives and negatives, and that's certainly true when you get into the sort of more affordable areas. When you get up in the higher areas, there's less and less issues with them, but each one is going to be designed for a specific reason. So downsides. Downside is if you're used to a more laid-back speaker, this is going to seem maybe bright or too forward for you. It can make trashy recordings sound like hot garbage. In fact, there were times when I was playing the music and I thought maybe I broke something. And I was like, is there something wrong? And I turned off the music and nope, it just was that recording was just a really bad recording. And I just hadn't heard all the distortion that was in it. And so that can be a downside for some people. But for me, when I was listening to it, I just loved that I kept hearing all these new things. I kept experiencing my music over and over again. I have notes on notes just saying like, oh yeah, in this song I heard this strumming pattern that I had never heard before. Oh, there was this thing and this thing. Like I said, it just kept me listening to music because I kept going, what new thing am I gonna hear? Okay, pairing this equipment, you're going to need to make sure that you pair it up with something with enough power. So what I found is that I could drive them with a receiver that had about 100 watts, and it worked okay. It wasn't great. It didn't give me everything, but it still sounded pretty good. If you're going to do some serious listening, and these speakers really are for that, you could use them in a home theater setup. But I think really where they're gonna shine is that music listening situation. And yeah, they need power, 83 dB. If you want that authority in the bass, you want that clear, everything stops on a dime, clarity, all that stuff. I used a Parasound power amp. It's about 220 watts into 8 ohms. And yeah, it was a good pairing. It sounded great. Okay, comparison. So as compared with the ELACs, and I already kind of mentioned it a little bit, but the ELACs in comparison sound definitely rolled off, way more emphasis in the mid-range. And you could actually play these a little bit louder than the ELACs. The ELACs would have they would have louder bass. There would be more bass in there at a specific range, but it didn't go as low. And then the bass was clearer at the same volume. So I felt like it kept its composure better than the Unifies. I think obviously with differences there, it's different kind of different cups of tea, right? So it may not be your cup of tea, but the high frequency and detail really just brought me in. I keep saying this over and over again. So under $500, if you're looking for a bookshelf speaker that gives you just clarity amongst and above everything else, this is my #1 suggestion. It is a fantastic speaker. I want to say a big thank you to Dennis Murphy for sending out these speakers to me. As far as I know, this is the premiere for this speaker line, so I'm very excited. If you're interested in this speaker, there's going to be more information in the description down below. And that about wraps up the review. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and have a great day.